the Capital Cafe dashboard, right? And I know today some of my AI experiments have gone wrong because we're spread across 3 different Zoom rooms and we should have all been in one. So apologies for that. But if you look here on the dashboard where it says the VIP Vault, this is where I'm adding a lot of interesting stuff. And you might actually want to grab this, but you're going to need about an hour to go through this whole thing because I have not used Google in 6 months.
Yeah,
Right?
me neither.
It's over. So unless obviously, I do know that Google is moving with it. But I mean, I find like the new Comet browser with Perplexity built in gives me one click, one answer, including the instructions, including the link where I can buy it, everything straight in there.
Yeah.
So what I've done in here is create a very deep research piece that goes very deep into both SEO fundamentals. But here's the important part is in section 3 is the answer engine optimization, because all of these tools like ChatGPT that is now built into your phone and Perplexity, etc., right? They are accessing these search frameworks very, very differently. And we as kind of the little people can actually get right in the front of this right now. It's a little bit like understanding the Google algorithms before they went really, really big and everybody got on the pay to play model. So if you guys are interested in this, I mean, it is a very, very deep dive. So take a peek into that, but we're adding a lot of really interesting stuff into that space at the moment. There are also some amazing books and all sorts of resources.
Just to even up your game, to get inspiration, to accelerate your business. All these books are so amazing, and you don't have to spend a fraction of the time that you would to read the book. And some of the books, are older books with great data points and information, but we overlaid a lot of our teachings and a lot of our books that we've written into it. So you're getting the best of modern times and, traditional wisdom as well. And I mean, they're just incredible. I love reading them myself because I'm always like to feed myself, especially like I'm coming into a meeting or I'm coming into, a day like today where I'm talking with you guys. I want to make sure like I'm sharp and I'm focused and whatever. So like, I'll put one of those books, I'll read it for, 20 minutes and I'm just like, I'm ready to go. So I find them incredibly useful.
And before we get kind of cracking on our agenda today, believe it or not, we actually do have an agenda, and we do want to share a few things. Keep an eye on this VIP vault, by the way, because the next thing that's coming. Last weekend, Lauralouise and I did a deep foray into email deliverability because we as entrepreneurs were so screwed because if you can't get your emails delivered, right? It doesn't matter what you do, right? So I did a big deep dive into optimizing that, and I've massively changed the game for that. And then also, if you are using AI tools, you can actually really train it to think like you and give you the information. And we noticed that because Lauralouise and I, we think and we solve problems very, very differently. And just going with generic AI prompts really doesn't serve you very well because you waste like 60% of the prompt basically getting it to give you the stuff in the way that you want it. So you might as well train it. And it's actually a very, very interesting process. So those kind of things are going on there. Lauralouise disagrees with me strongly. She's like, why are you giving everybody these things? And she keeps telling me off about it.
Well, and I said, like, one of the things we're working on for our private clients and some of our, our blueprints and courses is really integration of AI into the business suite and into the, into the agency model that we're building. So, when it comes to how you're marketing, how you're branding, how you're reaching your right fit client, how you're creating your funnels, all the different things that we do, where we're building accessibility and models that'll actually speed things up, literally like something that would take you, a year to do, and you can do it in an afternoon. So we're really just moving at the speed of light with this stuff. And that's why I say, I am investing in the picks and shovels of AI because the storage units, the facilities, all of the components, I think this is not going away anytime soon. And sure, you might take a little dip, but then it's going straight back up on an upward trajectory. It will not stay where it is right now. We are in infancy. And when you're in infancy, it cannot stay where it is. So
Yeah. So, and by the way, as with all of our cafe sessions, always feel free to drop your LinkedIn URL or your connection details in the chat.
and if you guys aren't connected with me on LinkedIn, please reach out and connect with me. I'd love to
Yeah.
do that. I will be getting a little bit more involved in my LinkedIn strategies.
Yeah, right.
I am.
Yeah, right.
I will.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Famous
Anric
last
is so
words.
out there, and he's
Famous.
so present that everyone kind of knows me through his LinkedIn profile.
just-
but
just today-
it would be great to connect with you guys
Today
as well.
it's a bit awkward because we're erroneously spread across 3 different Zoom rooms, so you can't actually chat with everybody. So it's kind of a little bit dumb, and that's my mistake.
I think most of the people on I am connected with. I see a couple that I'm not.
Yeah.
So if you're not connected with me, please, just send me a link request so that we could get connected.
But the reality that we want to talk about today is really capital raising. And it's a bit of a misnomer because when we say capital raising, right, it's really actually an old habit. It's a Wall Street term. And what we actually mean by that, for those of you guys who know us, it's about attracting your right fit client, investor, or partner. It doesn't matter, okay?
Yeah.
It's the same psychology. Because whether you're trying to land a $5 million client, attract a $5 million investor, $50 million investor, or secure a $5 million strategic partner, right? It's exactly the same process, right? Because none of us here, except maybe one of you guys that I see who's actually selling stuff on the internet, right? But none of us are really selling $97 trinkets on the internet, right? You're essentially attracting multi-million-dollar relationships with sophisticated people who actually have options and who have things to do. So, if you think that it's kind of different because you're not technically raising capital, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, even, you look at Elon Musk, right? And he needed capital to buy Twitter, as you all know. And you know how he raised it? He took his phone and he texted Larry Ellison and said, "Hey, any interest in participating with me on this Twitter deal?" And Larry responded, "Of course. What do you recommend?" And Elon's like, "Okay, well, I'd rather have you than anyone else. How about 2 billion, or do you want more?" And he goes, "Done, 2 billion. One text, one exchange, done deal." But here's the thing that, most people just don't get, right? This wasn't the first time they'd spoken, obviously, right? Larry had invested in Tesla years earlier. They had done other deals together. They knew each other. They had multiple interactions. They knew how each other thought. They had an understanding of who each other was. They had trust. And so when Elon needed capital fast, he didn't need to pitch He didn't need to pitch him. He already had the relationship. He already had, the connection points and the trust and the rapport to get the deal done.
Yeah, and when you think of just that framework alone, right, that simple text exchange really represents years of groundwork, right? Years of demonstrating competence, years of a relationship, years of Larry essentially watching how Elon thinks, how he operates, how he delivers. There's no pitch deck, there's no road show, there's no 47 slide PowerPoint, okay?
Can you see them doing the slideshow together?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Let's go through it.
Yeah, wait till I share my screen. That's the usual thing that people do on Zoom, which you got to stop doing. But it's really all about digging your well long before you're thirsty. And that's actually on our agenda today. So if you guys want to run through this with us, I think you'll appreciate it because we've been really practicing this for quite a while. I've also been really getting deep into my acronyms, which are down here on the...
This is a man who where's your acronyms?
Acronyms.
Oh yeah. So this is a man who didn't want to do acronyms because I love acronyms. So I'm always creating them like RAMP.
She has
up,
AAD,
and
acute
reap
acronym
rewards,
disorder.
and and then he starts creating them on his napkins.
Well, you got it the wrong way around. Turn it around.
Okay.
AIM. Attract, influence, magnetize. Come back a little bit. You've got to stay in Zoom.
Yeah.
But the one that I want to talk about today is really about drawing on napkins. Dignified relationships attract wealth. I think on the other side is Beacon.
Beacon. I like this one because that was my nickname, Beacon.
And what does that stand for?
Be extraordinarily authentic, creating opportunity naturally. I like that one.
All right, so that's the framework for today, because it really actually is about drawing opportunities towards you. And I'm really thinking of Margaret in this instance, because Margaret is out there like all the time, you know what I mean? But I think you can get way, way, way better at this. And I think you've already downloaded the ebook, which I think will really, really open your minds on that, because the big domino, right, that we want to talk about is that you want to be really drawing opportunities towards you, drawing relationships towards you, drawing capital in all of its forms towards you. Now, capital is attracted to people, okay? It doesn't walk by its own, on its own. And the big domino that makes everything else fall into place is that you've got to think of yourself differently. You are not a capital raiser. You're not a salesman. You are not an operator. You are a capital attractor. The only difference between begging and attracting is actually one thing, and that's positioning. Okay, same person, same opportunity, different frame. So that's the big thing that we want to break down into essentially 3 secrets today. So secret number 1 that's on my agenda is really the thing that destroys one false belief. Almost everyone that we meet is messing around with their mindset all the time, saying, I need more opportunities, okay? Most people think that their problem is deal flow, not enough warm intros, not enough connections, not enough investors, not enough getting to the bat, okay? And I think that's wrong, because what do you think the problem is?
Well, I think it's quality, not quantity, number 1.
Yeah.
And I think that people waiting for the warmth is not a good thing either, because there's only a very small percentage of the population that are warm, and everyone's going after those, right? So, let us show you something that will change how you think about capital forever, right? So picture the capital universe as 100 investors, and 10 of them are actively looking right now. They're taking the meetings, they're reading those silly decks that everyone sends out.
They're at the conferences.
And they're writing checks. And everyone is fighting over those 10 people, right? And here's the point that nobody sees. 90 investors aren't actively looking. They already have portfolio companies. They're not in hunting mode, though, and they're not responding to cold outreach. They aren't interested in cold outreach. And most people completely ignore that, 90% of the population.
Yeah, because those 90 investors, they're not set up. Their portals, their incoming, their machines are not set up to take meetings from people who are selling shit on the internet.
Yeah, because they're not active. So why would we waste our time, right? But here's the secret that we've learned over 35 years, that those 90 will write a check tomorrow for the right opportunity, for the right person to engage with, for the right inspiration, for the right solution, for the right new opportunity that they didn't even know exist. They're not dormant, they're selective, okay? They are ready to be engaged with the right person. It's like, when you walk into a store, ever walk into like a store and someone goes, can I help you? And you're like, no, I'm good, I'm just looking, right? And
best comeback I ever had was at a Ford dealer. I was looking to buy a truck when I still thought that I needed a truck. And I said, yeah, I'm just looking. And then the guy came and shook his hand and he goes, my name is James. I'm just selling. And it was such a great engagement, because I was there trying to be left alone. And he was like, yeah, I see you. I'm here to sell you a truck. You know what I mean? And it was so refreshing.
But I think the point is, like, these people aren't dormant. If there's a new opportunity, if there's some inspiration, if there's a problem that you can solve that they have, if there's an opportunity that would be something that would make their life better, easier, faster, more efficient, then they're going to be interested. They're not dormant. They're just selective. Right. And the beautiful part is almost nobody's talking to these people.
Yeah. So that's why we call that the 90% opportunity, right? Because everyone's competing for those same 10 people. They're at every family investor conference. And when you walk into those rooms, it's like a bunch of barbers trying to sell each other haircuts. It's embarrassing, right? And everyone is sending each other pitch decks, and the response is always, oh, that's great, put us on the list. Or they unsubscribe like crazy. You know what I mean?
I think actually people say, put me on the list, because it's just like, okay. And then that person can check the box. So they have like 4,000 people on their list. Nobody's looking at it. And once a quarter or once every half, someone will call and go, oh, and they'll pull up the list and be like, oh yeah, we're still watching you. And like, they somehow feel better about themselves in that process when they're basically, just doing nothing but kicking a can down the road and getting no outcome from that process. So, you can't approach that 90% the same way that you approach the 10% that are buying. I mean, it's a totally different animal, and it's a completely different process. But the beauty of it is it's like it's your runway. It's the runway you do this part right. You never have to like be begging at the 10% because they're just going to come to you naturally. They're going to think about you before they even know that they're looking because you are ever present. You are top of mind. So you need to be the person they want to know, not the person trying to sell them something. That makes all the difference, I think.
Because the difference between chasing and attracting, okay, is it's small, but it makes all the difference, right? And we want to literally take you through a little test that we do. We call it essentially the dining room table test. And I'll let Lauralouise explain it. She does
I keep touching my nose because I think I have golden retriever hair on my face, and it's like really driving me insane. Any of you have dogs, and there's like one little piece of hair on your face making you insane. I know. Thank you. So Anric and I, as most of you guys know, have already built several multi-billion-dollar businesses even before we met. And, we were very successful. And Anric was extraordinarily successful as an entrepreneur doing this literally from zero to a multi-billion-dollar fund of funds business. But he was a fence swinger, big vision, big bets, big wins, and occasionally, big learning experiences too. When we started working together, we brought different strengths. Anric sees the opportunities. I see sometimes the red flags, or I have to look at the red flags before I can get vested in an opportunity. He loves the building. I love the protecting and the kicking the tires and doing the due diligence. And together, we spot both opportunities and risks. And so it works as a very good partnership.
If this was a rugby game, you're looking at offense player here, defense player, okay? But you need both to run a good team. And Lauralouise is kind of interesting. I mean, she can literally spot a red flag in a warehouse that sells red flags, right? I remember at Infinity, we had like 20 pointy-headed quants sitting in a room with, people with 3-4 degrees, all the mathematical modeling, and she would just go, there is the problem. And they would argue with her, and then like 3 days later they'd come, yes, you were right. That's where the problem was. She can really spot these things, right?
It's like I can feel it.
Yeah.
Because I know my numbers, I know where things are supposed to be, and I don't always know, I'm not into like creating the spreadsheets and putting in the programs, but I can always know when a number is off.
Yeah, and she actually does read the fine print. I don't, I really don't. She checks the references. She actually calls people. She asks the uncomfortable questions right up front, right?
The why girl.
And totally. And literally, we would have a meeting with a fund manager, and keep in mind, we've sat literally, she thinks I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. I've gone through the numbers. We have sat through over 10,000 fund manager pitches, people pitching us on the income, right?
And there's probably a couple of people on this call that also done, thousands
massive.
Of manager interviews.
But Lauralouise would like literally tell me afterwards, I would be like enthralled with this person, and she'd go, this guy makes my skin crawl. And I would literally go, yeah, but look at their track record and look at their network, because I would sell myself into it, right? And then she asked me this one question once, and this is where this idea, this whole thing came from. She goes, yeah, but would you invite them to our dining room table and sit with them for 3 hours? And then I had to think.
So that's the question that changed everything, right? Because your business is a dinner party. And you'll enjoy it more if you start thinking about it that way, by the way. 12 seats, Anric and I take 2, and then we got 10 seats left. So who deserves those 10 seats? Who are you going to feel comfortable with sharing a meal with? And by the way, like whether we're investing with someone or hiring someone, we never do it without having a meal with them, ever, okay? So not anyone with money deserves to be there. Not anyone who will write a check deserves to be there.
Absolutely.
People you actually want to spend 3 hours with. If you wouldn't invite them to your dining room table, then why would you invite them to your business table? These are the people, that steal the silverware.
And you can take it kind of deeper. We do a lot of road trips. I love road trips. I love being in the car.
Me too.
And okay, so who would you drive across Kansas or Nebraska with? because
long drive.
it's really flat and it's really boring and it's really flat. And did I mention it's flat?
Well, sometimes you got to swerve for those like bull rushes that are like coming across the highway that are the size of a car.
But the point is, like, would you want to be stuck in a car with this person? Or like if you go back to the COVID stages, you know, when you had the lockdown and you had 10 people in your house, and then suddenly there was a lockdown and they couldn't leave. Like, who would you want to have in your house for 2 weeks, right? And my decades of, I mean, I really have a PhD in screwing things up, but it really taught me one thing, that getting better at saying no matters way more than getting better at saying yes, as long as you don't lose your curiosity. So yes, Lauralouise is right. I see opportunity everywhere. That part hasn't changed, right? And I will jump into this and jump into that and jump into that. But now Lauralouise and I, we actually filter our opportunities together. Like, my optimism is relentless, but her caution is, and I've learned to trust her. You see what I mean? So together, we're actually better than either of us alone. Because here's the big lesson that we learned. Wrong fit capital is the most expensive capital you will ever attract. The wrong investors will really shut you down. They will take decades of your life. They erode your confidence. They make you second guess every decisions. But also, the right investors are watching who you hang out with. And that's the problem, right?
That's a big deal too.
Yeah. And then if you think about right fit capital, that absolutely accelerates you. Right fit capital trusts you, makes you build, makes you, add value beyond just the check. I mean, these are real partners. They're not babysitters.
Yeah. And, I would also say that I also get a feeling about people who maybe haven't gotten to the point where they need to be yet, but you can tell their quality, they're diligent, they've got that fire in their belly, they are honest, they're trustworthy. And you know what? I follow those people for a long time. I've actually helped a lot of those people build their businesses. Before we even started Global Fund Advisors, I would be allocating money and I would say, you know what, you're my kind of person. I'm going to work with you. Here's what you need to do. And I would kind of coach them and help them along the way. And some of those guys, I actually talked to one of those guys last week who's now rated like the #1 long only fund that has been the best running record for the last 5 years. And I said to him, I said, I saw you and I had faith in you when nobody else did. And he's like, 100%, you were there from the very beginning. So it's nice to actually do that too. It's not just the great guys that once we kick the tires and they, come up all smelling roses, but there's some great guys out there that are young and lean and, but having an approach like this, I think really changes the game. A dear client of ours, learned this framework and he completely changed his approach. Because he had been chasing down dozens of family offices, as so many managers do, right?
He also actually spent a lot of money on going to all these conferences and, all the pay-to-play conferences and, all the lists. And I would see him on the internet every time one of these clowns offered a list, right? And he would put in the words list and then he got another list. And he had like 10,000 people on his list.
And he was just sending out decks like crazy, following up, putting people on the monthly mailing list, getting polite rejections over and over and over again. And this is a guy who's very skilled with very good pedigree, very small fund, but still, he just wasn't reaching his right fit client. And it was all, his approach was so wrong because he was just kind of begging, as Anric calls it, begging, badgering, and
bullshitting.
Yeah. He wasn't a bullshitter though, but, he applied the dining room table
I don't mean bullshitting in that context. It's sometimes like you bullshit yourself, right? Because you bullshit
because
yourself.
you're doing all the things. You're sending out, you're getting the list. You've got all these people reading your monthly list. Yeah.
Exactly. So you kind of bullshit yourself to think that you actually have a real business, that you have a real chance, and you don't, right?
Exactly.
That's what I mean by that.
So we got him to apply the dining room table test. So out of all those prospects, only 3 felt like people he genuinely wanted to break bread with, out of everyone. Like those are the people he had rapport with, the people he knew, the people he valued and aligned with him, and he aligned with them. People with, the foresight to think about him long term. And he stopped chasing the others and just focused on building real relationships, real rapport, real trust with those 3. And, first, he started with just conversations. He got rid of this silly pitching that everyone does that drives everyone. It makes people uneasy. Like, where's the exit and how do I get there really fast, And he shared his origin story is one of the frameworks that, we teach and love because it tells people the trajectory of where you came from, what your struggle was, who you really are, the kind of person that got to this place. And, why he was building this whole thing and what mattered to him beyond the returns. And one of those three, finally, someone who just isn't trying to take my money. They just felt like, you know what, I like this guy. He's a guy who's a real person, who has real relationship, real rapport, real skills. And gosh, I love his origin story because he has now showed me his path. And there's this thing that people want to do with you. They want to come on a journey with you, and they want to go to the vision that you're painting for them. So, someone like that guy, 6 months later, the investor led his round and introduced him to two or three others who also matched his values. And guess what? This guy had so much trust and so much rapport with him that he was saying to his friends, hey, I got to introduce you to my guy, right? And that this is my guy. Now, I'm from New York, and my father is Italian. So we always say this, I got a guy. And my father always had a guy. We had a fish guy. We had a guy where he got his clams, the bakery guy, the semolina Italian bread guy, the guy who...
Oh, he had a car guy, he had this guy, he had a guy for everything. But the point that we're trying to make is that all money comes with strings attached. They can be good strings or bad strings.
And if you got a guy who's your investment manager, who you're introducing your friends to, that's golden. That's golden. I mean, because everyone wants a recommendation. Like if you've ever been ill and your dear friend says, I have a very good doctor, he'll take care of you. You should go to see this guy. He's really great. You're going to go to that guy. Okay. It's the same thing with a lawyer. It's the same thing with a fund manager. It's the same thing. I built my businesses literally on referrals because the people that I did business with were so happy and we had such great rapport that they'd say, hey, Lauralouise, could you do me a favor? Would you meet my nephew is going to be in town. He's really looking for some strategies. I told him about you. Would you, meet with him? Of course I'll meet with you. Then the next time it would be his brother. Then the next time it would be his favorite restaurant owner who, really made some money and wanted to invest. Like it was crazy. Like I knew everyone in their family, including their dog. And of course, everyone knows my dog. So
yeah, but where we're trying to lead people to is to really show people that this 90% opportunity really, really exists, but most people just don't see it, okay? They're so busy fighting over the 10%. They're so busy going to every family office conference. They're so busy blah-blahing everybody's list, okay? Now, if you think about like people who invest in ag, for example, they all know each other, okay?
Yep.
People who invest in young upstart traders, right? Who are, the business that you used to be in, of basically building engines and building funds out of traders. They all know each other, okay?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that you got to think about it, right? Because if you're just there trying to drag people in with money into it, it kills your entire flow, because the key to all of it is you've got to stop chasing everyone and start selecting the right ones. And I think that leads us into our kind of, maybe it's a secret, but let's just call it phase 2, because
secret number 2.
Secret behind door number 2.
Destroys the false belief that I need to hide my failures. Everyone thinks like, leave that off your resume. I mean, in this day and age, if you left something off your resume, they're going to find it. Okay.
ChatGPT will find it.
Everyone in capital raising thinks they need to be perfect, have this perfect track record, perfect background, perfect story, perfect pedigree. They think investors want perfection. And they're very, very wrong on this. They're not a little wrong. They're very, very wrong. Because I've found, and having spent my career on both sides of the table, both investing and in, representing money, investing in funds and running funds, okay, it's really clear to me that the people who worked the hardest, who learned the most lessons, who overcame, I call them the overcomers. The overcomers are so much better. And I see that now in, markets where the young people, they don't understand the markets like people that are of our generation do, because they've lived through so many markets. But I think people also had a work ethic that was so much stronger back then. So you really see a difference.
I look at my own history. I mean, I've actually been making mistakes for 35 years, big time. And
we should get a T-shirt for you that says that.
I've had so many funds that have actually flopped. All right, sure, they're not on my bio. I don't put them on my LinkedIn. Like, I blew up this fund. But
well, I've never seen you blow up a fund.
No, but I've had things
not on my clock.
I've had things that didn't go, that didn't launch, that didn't get as big, that were not successful when I thought they would, and then you iterate them and all that kind of stuff. But there are also people that I've trusted with like everything who have completely screwed me. projects where I ended up basically was left holding the bag and paying the expenses because somebody that I hired failed to deliver, right? I mean, I am just a walking encyclopedia of learning experiences, and I'm not actually ashamed of any of them anymore. I used to be, but because I realized that this is what made me better at what we do now.
Right. When Anric and I first met, we brought very different strengths to the table. And still to this day, we have very different strengths. Anric had built a multi-billion-dollar business. He had real success and a real track record, but he was also swung at some pitches he should have let pass.
Quite a few of those.
Ones that I had actually not swung at. And well, actually,
I thought you were going to let the Wood River thing go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never.
All right.
Actually, I had a managed account for Wood River.
Yeah.
And the second I saw, because I didn't trust it, the second I saw the diversion, I pulled my money.
And I lost 87% of
And I pulled my money up.
Yeah.
But it was a managed account, so it had no bearing on the fund. And I said, there's something not right here, and pulled it. And other people, a lot of other people got just
shall remain nameless.
Just no, not just you. A lot of fund of funds.
Yeah.
So
all of Geneva got tanked.
And I think that I was Wall Street trained, but I was trained in global macro and micro, and I think that combining intuition and analysis is something that I just do very naturally. And I read. I want to know what happens. What if? The what if. I call it the hit by the bus strategy. What happens if someone gets hit by the bus? Even me, right? So, I check references and I review claims and I make sure there's nothing outstanding. And it's a very vigorous process that I actually wrote. I wrote a process that is a Six Sigma process for making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And so together we've balanced, that Anric's vision, my caution, his optimism, my intuition. And I think that has, really served us very well.
It has, because the best deals are very often the ones that you don't do, right? And sure, I really do still see opportunities everywhere, and that won't change. And I really hope that it doesn't. But Lauralouise and I, we evaluate these things together, right? And it's so interesting when you run a family office and you get so many approaches and so many people coming at you all the time. You can literally see it as they walk in the door, okay? And it's almost about this posturing, right? Because you can spot people as they walk in.
Yeah, and the opportunities and the red flags.
Yeah.
And the thing is that sophisticated investors will never trust perfection. They trust competence earned through experience.
Totally. Mess and clean up on aisle 4.
They trust when you've gone through something and you've found your way out of it. You've fallen down and you stood back up. It's a far better metrics of somebody who's really successful, because I don't know any of the greatest talent in the world have, all had their scars to prove, that you've been battle tested, you've learned, you've figured it out. And, the thing that really matters, you can't hide those scars anymore. Sophisticated investors will find them. So you should just come and, bring it forth, because they'll, never mind Google you, they'll put you into some deep search, AI, and they'll ask around, they'll discover went wrong. So you have a lot of choices. You can anesthetize your past failures or slips, or it doesn't even have to be failures. It's just like hard times. I mean, when I tell people about the things that really were those sliding door moments in my life, they're not about the moments where I was doing my best. They're the moments where I learned the most. And that's usually coming out of my experience of, really going through a tough time. So let them discover your failures and wonder, instead of wondering what you're hiding, or share your failures and show them what you learned. Show them that you're wiser because of it. You're smarter, you're faster than the other guy who hasn't, stepped in the mud yet, who hasn't, fallen into the ditch and crawled his way out. Those guys don't have the experience to get through. And if you think you're going to ever invest in someone and they're not going to go through a ditch, well, you haven't been investing very long, because there's a lot of ditches out there.
Which is why during our Crushing It events and stuff, I use this slide all the time. And it's really one of my favorite artworks out of Japan. Lately, everyone's talking about it. Even on TV, it was the other day.
In a movie, and we're like, we teach this, and they're talking about it on TV.
Because of the entire framework of Kintsugi really is about when pottery breaks, right? You don't discard it, you repair it with gold. because that repaired piece becomes the work of art, and it becomes literally 10,000 times more valuable than the original, because these gold-filled cracks, they really tell a story, and they show that the piece survived, and they show the artistry, and they prove its strength, right? And that is how we as entrepreneurs need to show our business scars, because they work exactly the same way.
And you know, for what it's worth, I've had both my knees reconstructed, and I am a better runner. I'm a better skier. You know why? Because they're stronger. When you have scar tissue, is always going to be stronger than your initial tissue. It's the way the body works. Well, it's the same thing with the way the mind works, right? Once you've had something go wrong, you're not going to, make that mistake again. It goes back to like the child hitting the stove with their hand. Guess what? They're never doing that again. Not every failure, qualifies, but your teaching scars, the one that's taught you something valuable enough to prevent others from making that same mistake, that's very valuable. That, I think, is something that people say, you know what, you've been there, you've seen that, you know what to look for. Those are the people you want on your team. You don't want to go out like sailing with a guy who hasn't had, some rogue wave come over and doesn't know what to do when, you get stuck in a storm. You want the guy who's weathered this storm. It's the same exact thing.
Yeah, the big test for us evaluating investment managers is always, because there are some people that just refuse to admit that they're wrong, right? You know, the type, there's so much hubris, there's so much arrogance because they've been successful somewhere. So we immediately can tune into that. We go, okay, we literally like look at the Kintsugi stars, and there are some people that just literally bullshit their way right through the whole thing, pretending everything is perfect, and they just cannot show that they have learned from their mistakes, right? By either pretending it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think ask yourself that question. What failure taught me a lesson that now saves my clients money, right? Saves them time, saves them risk, that basically they learn from your expertise. Your expertise is based on your experience. Your experience is based on the things that didn't go perfectly and you learned from. That's what experience is, right? That's your gold. And I think that's such an important thing. And it puts you on the right foot, because you go, yeah, here's when I learned this. Here's what happened. Yeah, I thought I knew what I was doing there. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I realized, no, this was a big mistake.
Just like our wrong fit partnerships, right, have taught us that dining room table test, because the trust the wrong person experiences, which I've had so many of, right?
Well, I think if you're an entrepreneur and you've been in business as long as we have, I'm sure that any of you could look back and say, that was not a good decision, or that wasn't the right partnership, or that person actually did damage to me.
Yeah, but that teaches you right away, like how to spot like a character misalignment in almost 30 seconds, right? And all of these experiences have essentially become the frameworks that we now teach.
Yeah.
The number one of which is trust.
Yeah, and trust is the ultimate currency. We say this over and over again. There is nothing that replaces trust in capital raising. You can't build it through perfect performance.
Nope.
You can't build it through shared scars. You can only build it by acknowledging your mistakes and, bringing them out and showing that your cleanup on aisle 4 was what makes you better, stronger, and faster than anybody else in that space. So when you show an investor your mess and how you cleaned it up, you're not showing them your weakness. You're showing them your prowess, your excellence, and your ability to overcome any obstacle. And like, if you think about this, and I think about this all the time because, growing up on Wall Street, and so many guys that I work with were Fulbright scholars and Rhodes scholars and, Harvard MBAs and everything. And, I worked with a lot of guys that had those credentials that couldn't find their way out of a paper bag. And, and some of them are really brilliant, but definitely not all of them. And, real intelligence is problem-solving ability, right? And so when you find yourself in that mode of, coming up against resistance, coming up against real challenges and stuff, or finding yourself in that hole, your problem-solving ability to get out of that hole is a level of intelligence that a lot of people don't have. Even people with the pedigree that, is deemed as the best pedigree. So I think it makes a big difference. So,
My advice for everyone, basically starting Monday morning, is just sit down on this weekend and think about your biggest teaching scars, because the failure that taught you the most valuable lesson, the failures that brought this epiphany of why you started that business, all of these things that is where the gold is. And then you can just reframe it very quickly with this formula. It's very simple. Because of insert failure, we know insert lesson, which means insert benefit to the client. Yeah. So if you take a couple of examples like that, you could literally just go, because I've launched this fund that flopped and that fund that flopped, we know exactly which structural mistakes will kill a fund before they start, which means you avoid those most common patterns early on. So we got really big into supporting emerging young fund managers in our careers. And we could spot it right away. They couldn't see it. They literally could not see their own blind spots, right?
Right.
I mean, think of so many managers we invested in, and we helped them because they were very good at running a portfolio, but they had no idea how to run a business.
They had huge holes in their business, and we could spot them instantly.
And help them with it, right? But because they were honest and they didn't bullshit us, we could give them the people. We could introduce them to those resources.
You know, at the end of the day, sophisticated investors are going to ask themselves one question about you. The one question that's the most important question. Can I trust this person when things go wrong? Because things will go wrong. And nobody gives a crap about trusting you when everyone's making money, you know? And there's lots of investors out there that the second you know, not making money, they'll pull it. And that's guys that shouldn't be at your dining room table, right? Portfolios underperform, markets underperform, unexpected challenges emerge. And guess what? Nobody rings bells at the top or the bottom. So, you know, they know that they need to know that when you're faced with adversity, that you know what to do, that you're not going to quit, that you learn the tools of the trade that other people don't know. Your scars prove that, and your perfect record proves nothing. It proves that you're not ready, you're not battle tested, and you're probably going to mess up the second, you know, the waters get rough.
And I think that was secret number two, which essentially was stop hiding your failures, right? Start weaponizing your scar tissue. And I know that we're massively over time, like so crazy. I don't know how that happened.
We're very good at that, actually.
Yeah, but I do want to bring you into our secret number three, because I think it's actually the most important one, because the frame that we want to change in people's minds, and this is where we spend a lot of time with our clients on it, because they think that investors hold all the power, okay? And before we get to this kind of frame control, we need to talk just for a quick second about what comes before the frame control, because what most people miss, frame control isn't where you start. It's actually what happens after you've earned the right through your story.
So let me show you how we taught a dear client of ours to approach this completely differently. His first instinct, you know, was what everyone does. Leads with the opportunity, the numbers, and the upside.
Yeah, totally.
Fact sheets, this
pitch
before.
books, yeah, you name it, right?
This is pretty much what everyone does. And we say, no, that's completely backwards, okay? First, you need to tell a story that helps the investor to understand who you are and why you're doing this. Not what you're doing, who and why you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm like a stuck record. I talk about that all the time, because the sequence that we teach, and it really matters, is that you essentially have to start with a 30-second escalator story, okay? And I'll explain why we call it that in a second, because it's not your pitch. It's an intriguing entry point, right, that earns you the right to tell the 3-minute story. Now, the escalator pitch works on video, works on your LinkedIn profile, it works on actual escalators, it works on a telephone, right? Because you got to kind of think about it a little bit like it is a formula, but you got to make it real and you got to make it yours, right? I help XYZ achieve, insert that, by insert unique approach. Does that make sense? I help people like this achieve such and such through this unique approach so that they can get more, have more, whatever, okay? Because that's immediately like in your tagline, right? Because it's got to be concise, it's got to be intriguing. It can't be telling them the whole thing. All you're trying to get them to answer is, Bob, tell me more. You know what I mean? Philip, tell me more.
Or just shaking their head in agreement, like, this is resonating with me. I understand. I would like that. I was hoping for this. I didn't even think this was possible.
Yeah, but because it's about this tell me more thing, because that earns you the right to tell your 3-minute signature story. And that story has 3 parts, literally, and it's very, very formulaic, and you must actually tell them in this order. So story number 1, Lauralouise.
Is that, well, that's your origin story, okay? That's where you came from. What shaped your thinking? not your resume, your origin.
Yeah.
This is way deeper. It's way more personal. And it really is about your personal experience that made you see this opportunity, made you who you are, made your drive for this outcome. All the things that took you to this place.
Yeah, because that launches and sets up your epiphany bridge. Because the epiphany bridge is the moment that you discovered this opportunity, the moment that you tripped and you fell, the moment that you brought the outrage where you said no more. You know what I mean? Like the moment you realized what others miss, because that is where you then connect your origin to the insight that drives your vision.
And the vision, this is the journey that you're taking them on. And if you don't explain your origin, your epiphany bridge, nobody can understand that they're coming on this journey with you. Where are you taking this? What becomes possible? Not just for you, but for everyone involved. It's like, the origin story, and people think, oh, well, I went to school for this,
God, like,
That's
shoot
not
me
your
now,
origin
yeah.
story. Your origin story is way deeper. It's rooted in who you are as a human being, not in what you studied at college. It's not about the practical, tactical moves that you made to get to where you are. That is not your origin story. Your origin story might have started when you were a child, to be interested in this kind of thing. It might have started in your teens. It might have started because of, something that happened in your family that drove you to want to be, more successful or help a certain type of people because you saw this as a child. Knowing each of you, I can go in and be like, I could get to your origin story. But it's really important that you understand that your origin story is not a resume. It's not like, oh, I thought I'd study this, and then that led to this, and that led to this, and that led to that. That's not an origin story. Origin story is the origin. It's like the driving force that got you where you are, not the education that got you where you are.
So Dimitri's question in the chat is a very good point, because he's asking how long should it be. So when we audit our clients' origin stories, we basically take a delete, an eraser to the front of it, right to the front, so that you can minimize it to right with the point where you're standing on a cliff and you were about to jump. Nobody needs to stand at a bar with you and go through your resume and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, so you basically have to write it, and then you have to take an eraser or a sharp knife to the front of it and try and cut as much as you can, right until the point, if you cut any more, the story will lose its validity. Because great ideas don't change the world.
Great stories do. And, it's not about rambling about me stories. These are stories that show the investor the person sees something I see. This person thinks like I think. This person inspires me. This person, is an up-level move from other people that I'm talking to in this space, and it really just changes the trajectory of the entire relationship, to the point where I will see people that I know and I haven't seen in 20 years. And like that, they'll ask me certain things that they know about me. They will ask me like, oh, how's it going? Are you still doing this? Are you still in that? I've been following you. I mean, can't tell you how many people I haven't seen in 20 years, but follow me all the time on social media. So, and I'll tell you something about Anric that most people don't know. When he starts drawing on the napkins, really serious people sit up and take notice. They go, what's on the new napkin?
Yeah,
Have you done any napkins lately?
I mean, some of my best businesses literally started on napkins. I mean, Infinity Capital was built on Imperial Hotel Tokyo placemats at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? I couldn't sleep. I drew the entire structure and the idea on 4 placemats, took that to breakfast with James, drew the entire structure again, and that was it. It was done. He was sold right there before the coffee got cold, right? And these napkins actually made their way into the PPM. I kid you not.
Mm-hmm. And, just like when Anric starts drawing on napkins, something happens. If I go out for a run, I'm like thinking, okay, where am I going? Like people know that like my creative juices start running when I'm running. And so some of my greatest ideas happen when I'm running or, when I'm out in nature. That is where my creative juice is from. And people start to connect with that because a lot of people don't talk about that kind of stuff, but that happens for them too. And then they start going, yeah, like me too. She's like me, abstract concepts become visual, right? Mm-hmm. The things that you don't know are going to get, people can see, what's being described, whether it's on the napkin or whether it's like me and what I'm creating in my head as I run, right?
But stories are the bridge.
Yeah.
And this is the part that takes us so long to get into people's heads, is that it's the stories that are the bridge into your world. It's the stories that will make people pay attention. The second you pull out a PowerPoint or a pitch book or something like this, it's already dead. It's already gone. It's the story that will open their minds, right? And sophisticated investors really respond extremely well because it's a story that even though you have orchestrated in the background, you have prepared for it, you have to make it real. No polish on it, no manufactured presentation. Just this moment of clarity, right? So with this client that Lauralouise was talking about earlier, we actually spent weeks, not hours, but weeks crafting his origin story, right? Not his resume, his origin.
Because I think it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to actually be that in touch with themselves because we're not trained to do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
seriously.
it took us so long to get through to him because he kept going into Wall Street mode and spinning us all the bullshit, right? And he kept bringing his resume until we got, actually Lauralouise broke through to his origin because he grew up watching his father literally lose their entire business because of wrong fit partners, right? So he saw how that desperation essentially led to bad decisions. And he watched his dad literally choose quick capital, desperate capital, over right fit capital. And that experience taught him as a little boy something. Capital selection, investor selection, partner selection is way more important than the capital amount, right? So we then helped him build that into his epiphany bridge because everyone out there chases the biggest, fastest check, right? And he learned to choose the right partner. So then when his vision story came through, we essentially got him to rethink it, that he was building a business that proves patient capital wins over impatient money. And it's an interesting nuance, but that became his entire investment thesis.
Yeah, and you know, when he told his investors that, something changed. They weren't just evaluating his business model anymore. They were evaluating whether they shared his worldview. And you know, here's the critical part that Anric and I teach. This is where most people completely blow it. Because before you position yourself as selective, you have to validate their path first. Not their demographics, their values, their value graphics. You have to show them, I understand where you're going. I understand your values. I understand your worldview. And if you think it doesn't matter, I'm here to tell you you're wrong. It matters because people who want to jump on fast money or fast performance or whatever, they'll jump on, but they'll jump off the second, you know, that something doesn't go well. And then they find out like you don't have the same value graphics or you're not aligned or you're not their kind of people, they're out. And it's just exhausting. And I've seen this happen to so many managers, my head could spin, right? Because it really does make such a huge difference. It is where the rubber meets the road. And I've also seen the opposite. People who really stayed with a manager through very difficult times because they trusted him, they believed in him, and wanted to go the distance, didn't want to come off, and they were rewarded as well. So, you know, you see it in both places. It's a really incredible thing to watch how the connective points between the investor and the manager, or the investor and the capital, you know, the company, change when you have your right fit client. Because it's like a camaraderie. It's like it's almost like your colleagues. You're in it together. You're on the same journey. They believe in your trajectory. They believe in the new opportunity, even when it's not going well. You know, I was listening today to somebody who was talking about Apple, and they said, yeah, you know, Apple has its peaks and troughs and stuff, but I'm an Apple guy, and I'm always going to be an Apple guy, and it's always going to be in my portfolio. Now, that did not start when Apple became big.
I used to think that about Nokia.
You know, but there are people who have owned Apple since its inception and never gotten rid of it because they've just always believed in it.
Well, let's get back to the investor mindset a little bit here, because the magic words are really validate first, then fascinate, and then position, right? Because that sequence makes your frame control absolutely natural instead of feeling like this forced meeting, right? So when this client sat down with his first really serious investor, we'd like to tell you the sequence of exactly how it happened. Because obviously by now he had been training and we had put the fear of God into him, right? So he didn't start with his pitch. He started with questions. I mean, he was uncomfortable, but he started with questions about value. Not like, how much do you typically invest, or what's your IRR target, or, you know, all these kind of fake questions. But he really tried to delve deep into finding out what matters most to this investor beyond the returns. What kind of businesses do you like to build? What legacy do you and your partners want to leave? And he really listened and took notes.
And I think that's exactly where trust gets built.
Absolutely.
You know, the ultimate currency, we'll always come back to that. People stay with the people they trust. People want to be aligned with the people they trust because they think this person will watch out for me. You can't avoid the bumps in the road. You know, you can't avoid markets, you know, moving and having cycles, but it's never about, you know, perfection, perfect presentations or perfect pedigree. You know, it's always through the shared values, through common ground on what actually matters, and really understanding demographics tell you nothing. Value graphics tell you everything. Someone's aligned with your value graphics, you are going to have good conversations, you're going to have good rapport, you're going to have great trust. You know, two investors can have the same amount of money to deploy with the same demographic, but one cares about quarterly returns, the other one cares about generational impact. Those are very different value graphics, right? Completely different partners.
Yeah, because when our client asked about the investor's portfolio, his philosophy of what they've invested in, what they've done well with, what has failed, what do they regret, not really just focused on the returns, but why those particular companies made it into the portfolio, right? This natural conversation happened because they could then find these connection points beyond the numbers, because it actually forced the investor to start talking about building businesses that solve real world problems, which was his real agenda, okay? Not just the money, things that create jobs, things that leave communities better than they found them, right? And our client at that point was able to naturally segue into that, right? Because he had been trained in some of our 27-word thing about throwing rocks at common enemies, right? He could then segue into that and talk about how other investors and these VC vulture funds basically just buy these things to literally optimize them for exit multiples, even if they have to buy 3 other companies and throw them under the bus in order to massively 100x the value of such and such company on the way out, right? And then in that ground, they found this like incredible validation and understood the investor's values.
Yeah, and notice what happens differently there. There's a psychological switch. He positioned the investor as different from the others, someone who thinks differently, someone who, you know, values align with his. That's not manipulation. That's recognizing alignment when you see it. Then, and only after validating their values, he told his origin story, how his father's experience shaped his thinking, why he believes, you know, patient capital wins, and where he's taking the business over the long term. You know, the investor then, you know, will lean in, start shaking his head, because the story's connected to the own story, to his worldview, to his values, maybe something that happened in his past. But, you know, it was a whole framework of value graphics that resonated with him, and where he was in his comfort zone, where he knew that, like, this is a person who's going to understand me. This is the person who's going to stand by me. This is the person who I want to be on the journey with, because we're aligned. And that alignment is really the most important thing.
Yeah, because you know what I said earlier, validate first, then fascinate, right? Because only after validating and then fascinating did he manage to control that frame where it became natural, right? So then the investor asked him, okay, so how much have you raised so far? And most people get defensive at that point, right? Because they read it as like, prove to me that others believe in you. Our client heard it very differently because it was genuine, because we'd also trained him to understand the psychology behind the question, right? That investor was really asking him, can you help me here? Am I making a smart decision here? Is this validated by others? Am I too late to something good?
Yeah. And so the client at that point, you know, responded by, you know, telling them the truth. I'm in conversation with 2 other groups right now. Both are conducting due diligence. And, you know, I'm sitting with you because when I researched your portfolio and your public statements, I saw actually, you know, you live the long-term impact-focused thinking that most investors just talk about. So that was just really important to him to make sure he was aligned. Now, this might seem esoteric and it might seem, you know, different, but there are little things that I know when I'm talking to an investor, I'll say, and the investor will just start shaking his head going, you know what? We're two of a kind. Like,
yes, and if
we're birds of a feather. You know, when people use like you know, expressions like that, they feel in a comfort zone. They feel understood, and everybody wants to be understood. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be valued. And when you're talking to someone and you're talking about the value graphics that light them up and mean something to them, there's validation there. And we feel a connective force with you because they feel like you understand them. And connective tissue, whether it's through love, whether it's through friendships, whether it's through business colleagues, that connection is a human need. And it also brings in their trust and security. When people feel understood, they feel more secure. When people don't feel understood, they feel they can trust that person more. All of these things are instrumental for getting people to want to do business with you. They're, way more important than like some sheet that might show, great performance or not so great performance, or, any other combination of such, right?
But the frame control on this part was actually quite important, because had he opened up with that statement of like, I saw you actually live the long-term impact focused thinking most investors just talk about, had he opened there, it would have sounded like corporate blah, 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 right? So when you think about that value alignment, which happens on a person-to-person basis, right, it's super important. But if you notice the structure of where we went with this, right, every single word actually mattered, right? Because when he said, I'm in conversation with 2 other groups right now, basically acknowledges the other interest. It was true, but it creates social proof. When he said both are conducting due diligence, well, that shows momentum. Real process is happening. When he went from there to I'm sitting with you because selection. He chose this meeting. He sets the frame. He's not, can I have your money? You see what I mean? Then going deeper into when I researched your portfolio and your public statements,
He ends up doing his homework. This isn't spray and pray. And I talk about spray and pray all the time.
well,
but
it shows that he did his homework.
yeah, you actually live the long-term impact-focused thinking that most investors just talk about. That's value validation again, right?
Yeah, because you're different because our values are different. You see what he just did, right? He combined and joined on the investor side of the table, because that alignment on values is more important than anything, especially who writes the biggest check. It totally reframes the value hierarchy. It's not about money here. It's about shared value. So when that investor, I realize we're massively over time, but I wanted to make sure you got this point, because
I think it's just important to understand, like psychologically and from a value graphics point of view, where that investor is coming from and what lights them up. And, as you start to do this, you start to hear better. You pick up on the certain things that really resonate with them. And when you're telling stories about your life, your origin, and your epiphany, that's where people lean in and will say, wow, I had an experience like that too. And I learned so much, and you're so right about that sliding door moment. Or, because you're sharing with yourself. You're sharing yourself with somebody, but you're sharing a story that your right fit client is going to resonate with, not because it's a great story, because it's your life, and they resonate with your energy, with your decision making, with the way that you do things, the way you serve, and how you make decisions, right? It's this whole process. And sometimes I'll say or I'll listen to somebody who's saying something, and I'll almost be falling asleep. If you've ever been in thousands of portfolio manager meetings, as we have, there are some times where you're like, paint drying would be an exciting uptick from that, right?
watching cricket.
And then they say something, and I'll be like, wait, can you say that again? Because it just resonated with me. And then I'm like, this meeting isn't over. We're going to take that point and we're going down. They don't even know what I'm doing, but they don't even know how to tell a story. But somehow I got this little piece of information that told me more than the whole blah, blah, blah that they've been going through. And that gives me the opportunity to take it deeper. And then at the end of the meeting, I will tell them, listen, you should start with that.
Yeah.
Because all the rest of this stuff sounds like every other, like 99 out of 100 meetings that I've ever been in. And honestly, it just puts me to sleep.
And we had the same thing with this client, right? Because the investor kind of then went deeper into it and said, okay, so tell me why patient, impact-focused capital, blah, 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 it's so important to you, right? And I mean, we really had to fight with him to go this part, but our client then went deeper into his origin story, right? And he talked about watching his father's business get destroyed by what is essentially impatient capital, partners who demanded quarterly results in a business that needed a minimum of 3 years to mature, right? Partners who cared more about their IRR than not the jobs that are being created or the community impact, all that kind of stuff, right? And it led to this incredible relationship because that pressure forced the bad decisions, and those bad decisions killed a business that could have been extraordinary, right? So that's when he was essentially had earned the right to say, I'd rather raise less or nothing from a partner who shares my values than more or all the money that I need from someone who only sees this as a return optimization experience, right? And that really united them because then they became partners at that point. And that's when the investor committed.
Yeah. Not because he felt like the guy was perfect, but because, you know, his entire, you know, the entire philosophy of him was genuinely aligned with him, with the investor.
Yes,
and that makes all the difference in the world.
And then they had the kind of real validation of values, right? Where, okay, I understand, I get you, I understand what really matters to you, and it matters to me too, okay? And it's the only thing that can do this for you is stories.
Yeah. Why I think the way I do, and it connects, and how it connects to how you think. You know, the story is a connective tissue that almost everybody misses. Or they tell the wrong stories, like about where they went to school and blah, 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 what they studied. And it's just, it never is going to connect. It's never going to build rapport. You know, a detailed rattling off of where you got all your credentials is never going to get you to the point that you can have trust. You can have, first of all, they won't even remember you. And as a woman in an industry that when I started in like 1990, okay, there was not a lot of women there. So I was very recognizable. And all the men wore the same suits with the same Hermes tie and the same shoes and everything else. So I'd go to conferences, and if someone didn't have a name tag, and I'd be like, oh, and you are? Like, it's the craziest like expression, but I had no idea. They all looked exactly the same, right? And they weren't memorable. But the people who I knew stories about, the people who I'd sat down and discussed, like, I know so much about them. And I'm a great question asker. You know, I draw things out of people like, you know, blood from a stone, and they will just keep telling me, you know, more and more about them. But long story short is that, you know, when you have those connections, you remember these people forever. And if they don't, they're just a sea of people with a pitch book trying to get you, and, you know, trying to like get to you. Oh, hey, hey, I wanted to meet. Oh, nice. What do you do? What do you do? Da, 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 da. Like, and you want to kill yourself by the time, you know, the conference is like, you know, 15 minutes in, thinking, how the heck am I going to be here for 2 days or 3 days?
The number one thing that gets people to lean in right away is, here's my mess and here's my cleanup. Proof that I can handle adversity. That gets everybody to lean in. And
pictures of golden retrievers.
Well, and then it allows you to go deeper, because you can go, this is why I chose to meet with you specifically, okay? Because together we can build something that, and so on, and we're on the road together, because this is, at the end of the day, sorry for being a party pooper, but I want to get this point across, because frame control is critical, but it isn't about power games or manipulation tactics. It's about demonstrating such a deep, sincere, authentic understanding of the investor's position, of the investor's values, not their demographics. Who cares about that? Their value graphics, okay? Because that selection becomes the next natural outcome, the next natural step. It's a little bit like when you meet someone, right? And you genuinely understand their path, their imperfect path, okay? But you understand their values, their world view, you know, and you can authentically show how your journeys connect to theirs. Like Lauralouise does these golden threads, right? You're not performing confidence. You're just demonstrating true alignment with what actually matters. And real people with money, they really get this.
But, you know, and I'd like to say that it's not just, I mean, you get people, when you do this properly, you don't just get people to give you their capital. Yeah. They introduce you to the people that they know and respect and want to share, because now you're like in the inner circle. But, you know, I also would like to say that it's not always so sophisticated. You don't always have to just jump down that path of your origin story. You've got to connect with them some way. And that's what Anric was saying. Like, I call it threading. And I can thread just about anyone. I can thread them on their clothes, on where they live, on how they travel, on animals, on nature, on sports, on diet, on cars, on wine, on food. Like, I can think of at least 50 ways that I can thread a person very, very quickly. Okay. And so we already have rapport. If you don't get that moment of rapport and you think you're just going to step in with your origin story, that's going to be hard too.
Yeah.
So it's like this dance of figuring out what's our connective tissue as I'm seeing somebody across the room that I'd like to talk to. Okay. I can get there very quickly. And I can also find out if we don't have connective tissue, right? And that's an equally important skill. If you are looking at someone and you don't have a way to connect with them, pass, move on. If you can't connect with them early on, make them come beg for it. Because once you've done this and you've connected with all these people, guess what? People are going to want to talk to you because you're interesting. You are available to be, have a personal rapport with. People find it great and fascinating and inspirational when they hear a story, and then they naturally come back to you. When you have natural rapport with people, they don't feel it like, oh my gosh, let's go the other way because that guy's been trying to talk to me all day, or that girl's been trying to talk to me all day. You feel like, hey, oh, how you doing? How are you enjoying the conference? Let's grab a drink. Boom. Right? And this is the difference between night and day of developing real rapport. And guess what? What's the next thing? You start talking about your origin story. It's like natural. But if you don't figure out how to get that, those connection points and figure out what lights them up, what is it they love to talk about? And by the way, people love to talk about themselves. So if you can connect with them on things that they love, right, then it's going to be very easy to get them to keep talking about themselves because they like to, everyone does. It's not just, if you come up to me and start talking about golden retrievers, I'm going to be happy all day long. Okay. If you come up to me and talk about, doing some philanthropic work for a cause that I believe in, I'm happy all day long. I will talk all day long because that lights me up.
And the reason why I'm just staying hidden here for a moment so you can read what's on the screen in the bottom right-hand corner, right? The reason why we build and we take so much time with our clients to build their signature stories, right? Because it's that validation of trust, and you have to use stories because stories make them feel something so that they will do something, right? And that's the super important part because trust is the ultimate currency. You cannot build it through perfection. You build it through shared values, shared stories, acknowledged scars, your fears, all of these things. And then it is the proof, essentially, that you can handle the mess and the cleanup on aisle 4. And that really was our secret number 3, which is not such a big secret because we keep talking about it all the time.
And I think it's worth just stating the authenticity, because authenticity, what makes you memorable.
Yeah. And the sequence actually really matters in this whole thing because it's validate first. Validate their values, their goals, their ideals. People forget that investors are people too. They have dreams, they have ambitions. They don't
Investors
ever,
are people too, walk-a-doo.
But it's your job to fascinate them through authentic story and to build that trust through scars, right? Because through that process, you can position the partnership as together we can create something that reflects these shared values, this shared mission. That's not manipulation. That's frame control of how real relationships form at the highest level. So I rest my case.
All right. So we did the 3 frameworks, taught you the 3 secrets, 90% opportunity at the dining room table test, right? Secret 2, weaponizing your scar tissue into competitive advantage because trust is the ultimate currency. And secret 3, the complete sequence is validate their values, fascinate through your story and your authentic story, okay? And build trust through your scars to position the partnerships. So.
Okay, so some of you have already seen this. I think Margaret, I know Dimitri and John have already bought it. Michael, you too, and Terry has bought it. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I did drop the link in the whole thing because we literally wrote a book for you, and it's called the Crushing It Fast Start Guide. So I'm here to sell it to you, but I'm not making money on it. It has 8 frameworks in it. We just taught you the first 3. The other 5 are really in that book, right? And it's about breaking that BBB cycle of the begging, the bullshitting and the badgering people, the what's in it for me translation formula, the moving train strategy, the LinkedIn profile fixes, and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah.
And the nice thing about this book is that 100% of it goes to charity. So every penny of it goes to charity. This is not, our bigger books, which we hope that you'll sign up to get a copy of once they are finished being published. but not a portion of the proceeds of this. Every penny is going to supporting our veterans and victims of human trafficking. So we just split the price down the middle.
Down the middle of that. And we really, we do this because we want these frameworks in the hands of people who need them, who will actually use them, right? And if those frameworks help you whilst helping the people that we believe in, I think it's a win-win. So if you have not yet bought that, please grab that link in the chat on that. And, you know, obviously, it's in a funnel. You're in a funnel right now, okay? And I don't want to lie to you about that because you're pretty sophisticated. The book introduces you to our complete system. We wrote it as a standalone thing, not as some kind of like lead magnet thing. But in chapter 8, we're going to show you the full implementation and what that looks like, okay? Should you want our help? And that's the Crushing It Accelerator, okay? I'm not hiding that. We're not pretending that this is just a thing. Some of you...
Well, so many of these concepts and these things are, you know, we're giving you like literally the tip of the iceberg.
It's pretty good though. Margaret, what do you think?
No, I'm not talking about the book. I'm talking about what we were talking about today. Like there's so many concepts where, you know, there's so much more. So we tried to give you a up-level overview in this book that I think will, you know, go through a lot more than we went through today, but, you know, really get you started on it. But it, you know, when we only have an hour or so, it's very hard to go into the dynamic and the depth and breadth, but the book will get you on the road to, you know, knowing the frameworks and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everything is all in there. Pretty detailed into all of this. Like today, you know, we discussed the 90% opportunity that's in it. It really goes through examples. It goes through do this now. I think it's pretty good. So I really hope that that
it kind of gives you a framework to start doing, which I love because you know, it's always good to have like a checklist of like, where do I start in this mission?
Yeah. So that's basically the whole thing. One of our clients who's wrote us a wonderful testimonial for it, your friend Marcus said, when you hear that something is worth 5, 10, 20,000 times what you paid for it, this is one of those rare moments. So I'm pretty proud of the whole thing. Let me just, yeah, that was very, very sweet. I realize I'm still off the camera here, so I'll get back in the frame here. There we go. Okay. So that was really the invitation. Obviously, if you have any questions, if you have any specific questions, we can answer it. We are still here. I might need another cup of coffee. Lauralouise might need another one here.
I might need some green juice.
Some green juice. Need coffee. But no, we are absolutely willing and able to answer any questions that you have. You can unmute yourself.
And just grab the link if you're leaving so that you have it.
Yeah. I know we have a couple of people that really have to run, so I appreciate you staying.
I think we went kind of over.
You think? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was your fault.
My fault? Wow, that's big. That's big. That's big. All right, guys. Well, if you don't have any questions for us,
it's great to see you guys. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yep, we'll leave it up there. All right, guys. Nice to see you. Bye.
You can do what you want, just seize the day. What you doing tomorrow's going to come away. Don't you ever consider giving